Okay, this is Senate Committee on Institutions. Welcome. Today is March 31st, 2026, and we're going to be looking at three different bills today. First is H 550, an act relating to gender equity within Vermont's correctional facility. Then we're going to look at H 559, an act relating to the parole board. And then we're going to discuss H 549. This is more of a process conversation, and that's regarding state issued non-driver identification cards for incarcerated folks. And that you'll recall that was part of a transportation bill. So first we'll identify ourselves so that you know who we are. Wendy Harrison.
Jane Galfetti, Representative Jane Galfetti, Berrytown for the record.
Okay, let's do
Rob Plunkett, Senator from Benson.
Joe Major, Senator from Windsor.
Senator Russell Rose, Essex. John Benson, Orange.
Okay, so Rep. Galfetti, would you like to walk us through
Absolutely.
write an introduction to 550?
Yeah. The committee had a formerly incarcerated transgendered woman that came in and gave some testimony, and that's kind of was the kickoff point for this bill. I believe Rep. Hedrick and Rep. Greer were the co-sponsors on it. And we worked closely with DOC when we were refining the bill, and it came a long way from its original starting point to what we worked through and got to you guys. And I guess I'll just outline a couple quick things as far as this bill. A few things it does not do. It does not automatically place individuals in housing based solely on gender identity. It does not remove the Department of Corrections' ability to make safety-based decisions, and requires placements that create risks for incarcerated individuals. It doesn't. The DOC ultimately still has to say on safety for both the transgender, gender diverse, and non-binary folks, as well as the cisgender people. And it doesn't prevent the reassessment of placement decisions if safety concerns arise. What the bill does do is require the respectful identification and interaction with incarcerated individuals. It establishes clear procedures governing need searches, creates a structured review process for housing placement decisions. And the bill's asking the joint legislative oversight committee to come back with a evaluation of what the best healthcare practices may be. And it also codifies Vermont's adherence to the Prison Rape Elimination Act standards as put forth in January of 2024. There were some changes at the federal level, and Vermont, we decided we wanted to be responsive to codifying what the Prison Rape Elimination Act standards were as of January 2024. And then also provides for some ongoing legislative reporting requirements. Section 1, obviously establishes the intent that gender identities deeply personal and individualized experience, and individuals may navigate their identity in many different ways, and there is no single prescriptive path. And also acknowledges that we're working in the reality that the Vermont correction system is a binary framework, and not all individuals fit neatly into that framework. In section 2 basically just establishes what some of the definitions are. We worked with DOC on this as far as what things were in statute and what is kind of common practice right now, realizing that this is like an evolving area of expertise, so to speak. And then it also aligns with what definitions are in the Prison Rape Elimination Act, and that PREA was an exhaustive process establishing the whole PREA guideline things. It was years and years in review before they came up with that framework, and we're just kind of being responsive to that. Section 3 obviously is the gender identification and non-discrimination, and it doesn't prescribe any kind of penalties if people fail to use somebody's specific gender pronouns or honorifics. It allows DOC some oversight there if it looks like it's an ongoing problem, but also codifies that people have a right to ask to be referred to in a certain dignified way. Reached out to the searches, and we took a lot of testimony from DOC that they're actually working on revising their search policy for transgender, gender diverse, and non-binary folks at this point anyway. So this kind of sets up a review for that, and they hope to have that in place. I think they had said by the 1st of June, and then the Joint Legislative Justice Oversight Committee can review that and make sure it's in line with what's going on. With the intent of this bill. Section 5 is, the classification and housing placement, and it is, just kind of acknowledges that transgender, gender diverse, and intersex people have the ability to request certain placement, but at the end of the day, it needs to be reviewed by mental health and WellPath and the DOC staff, and be kind of a decision that's made in concert that best reflects, what's safest and what's most appropriate for a given individual, and also puts in the prescription that there should be some written documentation if a housing request is denied, and a review period put in place so that can, be reevaluated from time to time, both with safety being of both cisgendered and gender diverse folks, being the heart of what we're trying to get at. And then I think we're gonna go. There's 7, 8, and 9 financial changes that just align everything in statute. 11 goes on to this PREA reporting, just to make sure that we're continuing to get the PREA reporting that we were getting as of January 2024, and make sure that going forward, we're still getting those same types of reports to the state of Vermont so we can respond accordingly. And then in section 12, we're also prescribing the Joint Legislative Justice Oversight Committee with the task of reviewing what is the most appropriate course of medical treatment and care standards, as with the ones of Vermont, oversight it all. And that is about it. 13th the effective date, and happy to take any questions.
Okay, this is very comprehensive. I didn't, you were.
I wasn't, but I have several.
Sure.
Yeah.
This is incredibly complicated.
Mhm.
I mean, there's no doubt about that on numerous different levels. It is going to be incredibly complicated for DOC. The current law is as far as bathrooms and things of that nature is as the person identifies. It is that along this line as the person identifies.
Well, this is to actually give more oversight to the term identifies.
Okay.
You know what I mean? We worked hand in hand with DOC and the craft.
Okay.
And this pretty much puts the policy and procedures that they're using already into statute and gives it a little bit more of a granular feeling. It is certainly always the purview of DOC to make housing assignments.
So
this is not putting in a statute that you can go into a facility and say I identify as any sex and that's where you're going to get placed at all. This does not open up any new doors. This simply puts into statute what DOC's current policies and procedures already are, with safety being paramount, no matter what, and DOC having the final say. But it does give it some transparency so that there is, some oversight to it and some written documentation so it can be reviewed as an ongoing thing, because this is on a continuum.
mm-hmm. And when you say the oversight specifically, by,
There's a DOC panel
Right.
that's got medical professionals on it and some, well, I know it's not exactly who else is on the panel. I can get back to you with that, but it's a number of entities within DOC and the medical provider WellPath to make that determination.
but more than anything, it is DOC has got
DOC has the
Has
final
got
say.
it.
At the end of the day, yeah, DOC in concert with, their medical providers will have the final say at all times. And even if a classification is made and it turns out later that DOC feels there's a safety concern, they have the right to make new determinations.
So this took their existing policy and it put it in paper form. What did it change from their existing policy? Because everything changes.
I mean, honestly, we worked as closely with DOC as you could possibly imagine on this. I don't think that we put anything into statute at this point. We've got the review to the Justice Oversight Committee for the medical care, but we didn't add anything in there. We didn't do anything with their search procedure because the DOC and the new commissioner made it very clear that they're aware of this issue, and we gave them the opportunity to go ahead and craft their search policy so that, and then gives us the ability to review it. But we were trying to be very receptive of what DOC's needs and concerns were. And I think their biggest one was with some of the PREA stuff because the federal guidelines have kind of evaporated in some ways. And they want to make sure that the good work that they're doing with PREA continues to get done. And that was kind of the biggest need to put that into statute, that those guidelines are going to be followed. So all of that work went into the whole PREA thing in the first place, and Vermont's going to continue to track that information regardless of whether or not it's prescribed federally.
Okay, great. Are there other questions? I have a couple of questions.
I have a couple.
Okay, do you want to go ahead?
So other than the PREA policies, and this will probably be a question for DOC, do you know which policies this mirrors? Like quite literally.
I mean, it mirrors their search policies to the best that it's going on right now. Like I said, they're redoing all their search. I don't have a list of numbers.
I'll ask DOC for that. And in terms of those policies, I know DOC has policies and they also have rules. Are these just the policies that they put in place without going through the rulemaking? Or
Yes,
okay, great.
So internal policy.
it's just internal policy. Yeah.
Okay, great.
All right, thank you.
Great. So I have just a question about PREA. So I don't think this is what is the case, but DOC has been involved in PREA before 2024.
Oh,
right?
yeah, absolutely.
good.
What happened in, when the new federal administration took over and did the, two gender, definition, there's some gray area as to whether or not they were going to continue to report on numbers that affected gender diverse, transgender, intersex folks. And Vermont wanted to be proactive and responsive to that to make sure that those numbers are still getting reported and those cases are being looked at specifically.
Great. That's very helpful. So we'll look at your witness list and talk to those folks. Is there anyone who's not on your list that you've realized could be helpful to us?
We didn't talk to any formerly incarcerated cisgender women. I think you could probably add something like that on there. I think it'd be really helpful if you had the witness that testified to us, kind of the genesis of the bill, and I know she'd be happy to come in. She's very familiar with the correctional system across so many different facilities and has that lens to look at it. She was incarcerated for over 10 years, I believe, and had been in Pennsylvania and Michigan and Mississippi and then back at CRCF. So she's got some really good information there. So I'd encourage you to have her in. And,
We'll definitely have her.
I'm trying to think of anybody else. Maybe
Or not even specific people, but types of
people.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, no, as far as like, I know there was one formerly incarcerated transgendered male. We didn't have a transgendered male come in. We had a transgendered female woman come in. So that might be helpful. It's not as common, but it's certainly a thing. And think that was about it.
Okay, all right. Well, you did a lot of work, so we appreciate you.
Yeah, we wanted to get this right.
Yeah, good, good. Any other questions? Are we good? Okay, well, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Now. Obviously, you're available because you're right here. Thank you.
And I do have a hard stop like a minute before 1:30. I'm doing House Judiciary, but
Okay,
happy to see what we can cover and then come back and
we will hold
if we
our
may.
questions at this time. Thank you.
do I have permission to share my screen?
Yes, please.
All right, so for the record, Hillary Cheddar Ames for the Office of Legislative Counsel. Representative Galfetti, I think, gave a very thorough overview of the different sections, so I will hop right into the first. Just as a flag, I have two things to cover today. One is walking through the language, of course, any questions you have, and then there have been some legal developments related to laws like this that I wanted to make sure the committee was aware of.
Okay.
All right, so section 1 is the intent section. It expresses kind of three main ideas that transition is unique to each person. Not everyone who is transgender or gender diverse always transitions the same way, and it does not always involve medical treatment or medical diagnosis of gender dysphoria. That's subsection A. Subsection B expresses the intent to recognize that there are challenges to transition in correctional settings, and that regardless of those challenges, transgender, gender diverse, and intersex inmates deserve respect, agency, and dignity, regardless of how they're transitioning. Subsection C expresses the intent to recognize that transgender, gender diverse, and intersex individuals are at a higher risk in correctional settings for abuse, harassment, and sexual violence. So I guess in light of time, interrupt if you have questions, but I'll kind of keep moving through. Section 2, as Rep. Galfetti mentioned, is the definition section. So this would add several new definitions just for use in Title 28. So they're not broadly applicable to all the VSA. It's just for use in Title 28 and corrections. The DOC can answer more questions, but the quick number reference about the policy for your question was policy 432 dated March 2026. And that will be where the definitions were adapted from. And the classification of housing language will also be, that policy will be the reference for that. So there were some modifications made to have it.
Say the number of the policy.
Yes, 432.
Okay.
And that should be the one dated March 2026. There was a very recent provision reviews.
Thanks.
So some changes were made in section 2 from DOC policy so that the definitions were expressed in the way that we express statutory definitions, but they're otherwise in alignment with how DOC currently uses and understands these terms. So this section adds a definition for gender diverse, for gender pronoun, for honorific, for intersex, and for transgender. It also recognizes that there is already a definition of gender identity in 1 VSA 144. Gender identity means an individual's actual or perceived gender identity or gender-related characteristics intrinsically related to an individual's gender or gender identity, regardless of the individual's assigned sex at birth. So that, yes.
I'm sorry, David, so this just references 144, doesn't have the language that you just said.
Correct.
Okay.
And the reference means that if the definition in 1 VSA 144 were ever changed, this would change with it.
Okay.
If the committee wanted to fix the definition as it currently is, then that would be a reason to not reference the section, but instead kind of repeat the language. But I just wanted to provide at least a verbal reference for what that definition is. All right, so moving forward to section 3, and I realize I'm not tracking on my screen. I will do a better job of that. Section 3 is on page 4, starting on line 14. This would add a new section in Title 28. This section covers 2 things. 1, gender identification and address, and 2, non-discrimination. So subsection A describes how the department, I think first broadly says the department shall ensure that all individuals are addressed in a manner consistent with their gender identity. And then the rest of this subsection walks through how the department gives the opportunity to each individual to express their gender identity. And for transgender, gender diverse, or intersex individuals, they can request the gender of staff and they perform a lawful search. That's consistent with what DOC's search policy has been. And of course, as Rick already mentioned, to the extent that there are upcoming changes to the search policy, there's a review process in place to make any necessary updates here. Subdivision 2, an individual shall not be disciplined for refusing to answer or for not disclosing complete information in response to the questions in subdivision 1. So this really is the department giving individuals an opportunity to provide information, but there's no requirement, there's no discipline for not providing it. Subdivision 3 expresses that even if it's not an intake, if an individual wants to provide information at any point, they can do so. And subdivision 4, the department will provide staff and contractors with gender responsive training proportional to their level of interaction with inmates. So DOC testimony described that some staff don't have direct interaction with inmates, some have much more, and that training would be appropriate to their level of interaction. Subsection B, if and when the department decides not to accommodate a transgender, diverse, or intersex individual's search, classification, or housing placement request, it cannot be based solely on the individual's anatomy, including genitalia, other physical characteristics, or diverse gender expression. So though that section is an overarching section that applies to department work generally, and some of the next sections are a little bit more specific.
And I know and to be respectful of your time, I'm not going to I'm going to I have a question to that. Simply because it doesn't tell me that what you're going to base it on at that point. I particularly with this, you don't like to keep things open.
Absolutely. The preview is that an upcoming section will provide at least some of that answer.
So what you're saying is, Senator Major, shut up, and I'll get you.
Not at all.
No,
More
no,
vague. Rest assured,
Yeah.
your question will be answered
Fair enough.
by the statutory text.
I probably have the same type of question, and probably Engel's gonna shut up too.
Yeah, and I noted that
But
also.
what,
Yeah.
can this inmate be searched like any other inmate?
Yes.
Okay. And we're probably not going to get all the way through anyway, so we'll keep.
Section 4 is adding a section about searches. Subsection A just describes that this shall apply to all lawful searches, any lawful searches. The kinds of searches that DOC explained they do are clothed searches, unclothed searches, urinalysis, and body scans. So by listing them, the section is saying it applies to all of them. Subsection B is actually a PREA standard. The House Corrections Committee decided it was important to have reflected here. The department shall not search or physically examine or request that contractors search or physically examine any individual for the sole purpose of determining the individual's genital status. Subsection C provides, at least as to searches, that the department is considering on an individualized basis a transgender, gender diverse, or intersex individual's request about the gender of staff to perform a search. But ultimately, the department is making that decision based on the individual's health and safety and whether accommodating the request would pose risks to safety or security. So that could be to other inmates or to staff. And the DOC testimony was that as they are revising their search policy, those are the kinds of things that they are considering in implementing those revisions. Section 5 adds a section right after the existing section on classification in Title 28. It would be a new section, 701C, about classification and housing placement determinations. Subsection A just says the department shall make classification and housing placement determinations for transgender, gender diverse, and intersex inmates consistent with this section. B, the department shall ask transgender, gender diverse, or intersex inmates to specify their request to housing placement during intake. So they have the opportunity to provide their view or request as to what housing placement is appropriate for them. And then subsection C, this is at the top of page 7. The department shall make classification and housing placement determinations for transgender, gender diverse, or intersex inmates based on the department's multidisciplinary review panels. So that is DOC's current system. They have 2 levels of multidisciplinary review panels, one at the facility and one centrally. This adds that the multidisciplinary review panels shall consult with various folks with medical and mental health expertise or who have training aligned with nationally recognized standards for gender affirming care. And there was testimony that that currently happens, but this would kind of include that as a requirement. Subsection D provides, I think, more information in response to your question, Senator Majors, about if the department can't look at these things, what can they look at? So similar to the search language, the department's considering on an individualized basis whether a placement would best support inmates' health or safety or pose risks to safety or security. DOC described that they sometimes will tell an inmate that an appropriate or determine that an inmate's request isn't appropriate at a certain time, but that with steps or after a period of time, it might be appropriate. So that second sentence in subsection D expresses that this might be more of an ongoing conversation. Subdivision 1, the department shall give serious consideration to the inmate's classification or housing placement request. But if the department finds that accommodating that request would pose an unreasonable risk to institutional safety or security, the inmate's health or safety, or the safety or security of other inmates or staff, the department may decide that it cannot accommodate the request. So House of Corrections wanted to balance respect for transgender, gender diverse, or intersex individuals' request based on their identity and their expressed identity, while also reconciling the department's safety and other needs to make decisions. And as Rep. Galpetti mentioned, the statute or the bill doesn't change anything about the Department of Corrections' ultimate authority to make decisions based on the kinds of things that it has to make decisions based on, including institutional security and safety and security of all inmates and staff. On the top of page 8, subdivision 2, this also adds that the department shall make classification and housing placement determinations on an objective basis. Subsection E adds that documentation requirement that Representative Galpetti mentioned, that if the department is not accommodating an inmate's classification or housing placement request, the department needs to document the specific reason. Subsection F, this essentially says that just like the department has to consider these things on an individualized basis for placement at a given facility in state, if they are considering an out-of-state placement, they have to consider the same kinds of things. And they should also coordinate with any out-of-state facility about reassessing placement determinations. And then I have an eye on time, so I will kind of finish this section and then I have to duck out. But subsection G talks about the department reassessing placement. So as Representative Galpetti mentioned, the department will reassess placement if the inmate requests it or raises concerns about safety, or if the inmate engages in misconduct, including conduct that poses a safety risk to the inmate or other inmates. Both of those things would trigger the department reassessing a housing placement. And then the final subsection in section 5, the top of page 9, with regard to bed assignment and housing placement decisions, the department shall give a transgender, gender diverse, or intersex inmate's perception of health and safety serious consideration. So the department will seriously consider selecting the inmate with whom the inmate is housed to best support safety and security. And if there's an articulable risk to the inmate, the department will remove the risk where possible or otherwise alleviate the risk. I would stop there.
I think that's a good
Yeah,
place
I
to
do.
stop.
And then I'm happy to, I will be back later on another bill, but I'm going to come back on the rest of this.
Okay.
When the committee has time.
Terrific. Thank you very much. We'll see you soon. So our next item, I don't think we should discuss this now until we get the rest of the walkthrough. So our next item is at 1:45, so we'll take a 15-minute recess. So we are adjourned.